At the Conservative Party conference, the Prime Minister said she wants Britain to be a country where it doesn't matter where you were born. But the Home Secretary's flagship announcement was to name and shame companies that employ foreign workers. Could the Prime Minister explain why where someone was born clearly does matter to members of her cabinet?
First of all, can I say to the right honourable gentleman, congratulations on winning the Labour leadership election. And can I welcome him back to his place in this House as his normal self? Can I say to him that the policy that he has just described was never the policy that the Home Secretary announced. There was no naming and shaming, no published list of foreign workers, no published data. What we are going to consult on is whether we should bring ourselves in line with countries like the United States of America, which collect data in order to be able to ensure that they're getting the right skills training for workers in their economy.
Mr. Speaker, I am most grateful to the over 300,000 people that voted for me to become the leader of my party. Mr. Speaker, is rather more than voted for her to become leader of her party. She seems to be slightly unaware of what's going on. First, the Home Secretary. First, Mr. Speaker, the Home Secretary briefed that companies would be named and shamed. The Education Secretary clarified that data would only be kept by government. And yesterday, Number 10 said it was for consultation. And the Home Secretary clarified the whole matter by saying it's one of the tools we're going to use. This government has no answers, Mr. Speaker, just gimmicks and scapegoats. Yesterday, we learnt that pregnant women will be forced to hand over their passports at NHS hospitals, no ultrasound without photographic ID, heavily pregnant women sent home on icy roads to get a passport. Are these really the actions of a country where it doesn't matter where you were born?
Minister.
Well, I've made absolutely clear about the policy that the Home Secretary set out. But I'd just say to the right honourable gentleman, he raises issues around the health service. I think it is right that we should say that we ensure that when we're providing health services to people, that they are free at the point of delivery, that they are eligible to have those services. That where there are people in this country who come to this country to use our health service and who should be paying for it, that the health service actually identifies those people and makes sure that it gets the money from them. I would have thought that would be an uncontroversial view. Of course, emergency care will be provided when necessary, absolutely without those questions. But what is important is that we ensure where people should be paying because they don't have the right to access to free care in the health service, they do.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Some of her colleagues on the Leave side, Mr. Speaker, promised us £350 million a week extra for the NHS. She doesn't seem to have answers to the big questions facing Britain. On Monday, the Secretary for Brexit, when questioned about the government's approach to the single market access, replied, "We need hard data about the size of the problem in terms of both money and jobs." It would have been much easier if he'd simply asked his colleague, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, because he would have been able to tell him that the Treasury forecast is a £66 billion loss to the economy, 7.5% of the GDP. Can the Prime Minister now confirm that access to the single market is a red line for the government, or is it not?
Well, the right honourable gentleman has asked me this question before, and yes. He says it's a simple question, and I will give him the simple answer. What we are going to do is deliver on the vote of the British people to leave the European Union. What we are going to do is be ambitious in our negotiations to negotiate the best deal for the British people, and that will include the maximum possible access to the European market for firms to trade with and operate within the European market. But I'm also clear that the vote of the British people said that we should control the movement of people from the EU into the UK, and unlike the Right Honourable Gentleman, we believe we should deliver on what the British people want.
Someone once said that leaving the single market would risk a loss of investors and business, and we risk going backwards when it comes to international trade. That person is now the Prime Minister, and that was before the referendum. The Japanese government, Mr. Speaker, the Japanese government, Mr. Speaker, wrote to her in September worried about a shambolic Brexit. Many Japanese companies are major investors in Britain, such as Nissan in Sunderland, which has already halted its investment. 140,000 people in Britain work for Japanese-owned companies. They've made it clear that those jobs and investment depends on single market access. What reassurance can she give to workers today desperately worried about their future, their company and their jobs?
First of all, say to the Right Honourable Gentleman that the biggest vote of confidence that we had in Britain after the referendum vote came was £24 billion investment from a Japanese company, SoftBank, in taking over Arm. But secondly, in relation to what we're doing in our negotiations, he doesn't seem to get what the future is going to be about. The UK will be leaving the European Union. We're not asking ourselves what bits of membership we want to retain. We're saying what is the right relationship for the UK to have to the maximum benefit of our economy and citizens of this country.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Mr. Speaker, the member for Broxtowe said there is a danger that this government appeared to be turning their back on the single market, which was indeed a commitment in the Conservative Party manifesto. The reality is that since the Brexit vote, the trade deficit is widening, growth forecasts being downgraded, value of the pound down 16%, an alliance of the Chamber of Commerce, Confederation of British Industry, British Retail Consortium and Trade Union Congress have all made representations to the Prime Minister demanding clarity. Is the Prime Minister really willing to risk a shambolic Tory Brexit just to appease the people behind her?
What the Conservative Party committed to in its manifesto was to give the British people a referendum on whether to stay in the European Union. We gave the British people that vote. They have given their decision. We will be leaving the European Union, and in doing that we will negotiate the right deal for the UK, which means the right deal in terms of operating within and trading with the European market. That's what matters to companies here in the UK, and that's what we're going to be ambitious about delivering.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Mr. Speaker, the Right Honourable Member for Rushcliffe often has a mot juste to help us in these debates. And he simply said,
I want to hear about the Right Honourable and Learned Member for Rushcliffe.
very long way, Mr. Speaker, and what he said was, in his own inimitable way, the reason the pound keeps zooming south is that absolutely nobody has the faintest idea what exactly we're going to put in place.
Yeah.
We on these benches do respect the decision of the British people to leave the European Union. But this is a government that drew up no plans for Brexit, that now has no strategy for negotiating Brexit, and offers no clarity, no transparency, and no chance of scrutiny of the process for developing a strategy. The jobs and incomes of millions of our people are at stake. The pound is plummeting, business is worrying, and the government has no answers. The Prime Minister says she won't give a running commentary. But isn't it time the government stopped running away from the looming threat to jobs and businesses in this country and the living standards of millions of people?
Yeah.